see this coming. CNN didn't wait long to bring up climate change in its Hurricane Harvey coverage.
Is there a why to this? Why there is so much water associated with this storm? One of the things we've heard from scientists over the last 10 years is that climate change does impact the intensity of many of the storms that we see.
I probably wouldn't attribute what we're looking at here. This is not an uncommon occurrence to see storms grow and intensify rapidly in the western Gulf of Mexico.
Juan, why is CNN using a crisis like this to drive a political narrative?
Yeah, why? Maybe they're in the ratings business. I don't know. But my
they should
sense
do a better job.
My sense of it is that we live in a highly politicized society. Everything gets politicized. It's hard to politicize the weather. Everybody gets affected by the weather. As they say, it don't rain on one man's roof. But I think
like that.
You like that?
Yeah,
I think that's Bob Marley. But you know what's interesting to me is there are people on either side, because what I was reading today as we were preparing, Lisa, was that in fact the ocean temperature in the Gulf has gone up. You see the level of the water in the Gulf is now higher than it's ever been. You hear this from the oil people in terms of where they have to position their oil rig platforms. But the idea that you know exactly why this is happening or attribute the intensity of the storm to climate change, I think it's premature. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and even the former National Hurricane Center director, Bill Reed, who, what's his face from CNN, was talking to, but he subtly contradicted what he said, saying, look, this is something I've seen throughout my career. This is something that happens. I mean, you can go back in history and look at times where we've had hurricanes or mass flooding that lead to, a lot of unfortunate things. Jesse, this is not the first time the media has tried to do this. We saw NBC's Ron Allen using Hurricane Matthew to promote the need for the Paris climate deal. What say you?
I'm surprised CNN's not blaming the storm on racism. I think if the storm
or Russia.
Yeah, or Russia.
Trump.
Right. If the storm was named Robert, they'd probably have to make a little name change there. I think Wolf Blitzer, like 2 weeks ago, said maybe the terror attack was in where they drove the van into everybody in Barcelona. Maybe that was a copycat attack from Charlottesville. When people on the news wonder about things, they always act, it sounds really dumb. And I love when a liberal commentator asks a serious question to an expert that's like basically some liberal scheme, and the expert goes, I don't think so. No. And that was great to watch that expert just, I really enjoyed that. I want to loop that clip. Listen.
Hopefully your producer's watching.
I mean, hurricanes have been happening since the beginning of time. Right. I mean, there was no industrial revolution hundreds of years before when they were having hurricanes. So they haven't had one for the last almost decade like this, and Obama was president. So I don't know if it's fair to blame global warming on these things. These things just happen. It's called the weather.
Yeah, Kimberly, don't you think that it's also just sort of particularly cheap, given the fact that we do have a lot of lives at risk right now in Texas, and what they should be doing is informing viewers about the things that they need to be concerned about, the places that they can go to look for help?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, they're never going to miss an opportunity to be politically, opportunistic and take advantage of it. But the fact is, we haven't had a major hurricane hit the United States in 12 years. Mm-hmm. So their theory isn't really holding up to try to blame it on global warming and climate change, et cetera. I mean, if they could, they would, but the facts just don't, warrant and substantiate it.
This one is certainly stronger, but like Hurricane Sandy did a heck of a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Some of the towns in New Jersey are still trying to recover from that economically. I don't mind bringing up climate change. I do think that trying to say that that you have more water dropping in this storm because of climate change, I think that the national weather guy was right to push back on that and say that's not true. I think climate change is happening. I don't think we can exactly say why. I think it's always been changing. But I do think the other thing that's happening is that you see pre-criticism of President Trump for the handling of the hurricane. And this all goes back to Hurricane Katrina. And President Bush did take responsibility for the things that happened there. There was an after-action report in which the government has improved dramatically how it deals with these kinds of things. But the other thing that President Trump doesn't have to deal with is an incompetent governor and incompetent mayor hitting the city of New Orleans. I mean, that was really something that President Bush decided to take the responsibility for it, to take the heat off of them so that they could try to actually work together to get stuff done, try to help the people there.
And Dana, from having worked in the White House, what would you advise this White House? How should they be handling?
I think
things
they're doing.
right
I think
now?
they're doing a fine job. I think there was a premature to say they would be going to Texas on Monday or early next week because you kind of don't know what it's going to be like, and but they can adjust that. But one of the people that's there at the White House now is a Deputy Chief of Staff, Joe Hagan. He was also Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush. He was there for Hurricane Katrina. He has got Tom Bossert at the Department of Homeland Security or at Homeland Security
You like
Council.
him.
He's wonderful. He was
Yeah,
also there, a part of that whole team. So they lived it. They know what went wrong, and they know how to help this one be a successful response. But again, state and local governments are so important in these things. The
true.
president can only do so much sitting in Washington. It's really up to them.
Well, that's why I was
local
wondering
level.
about the failure to make the evacuation mandatory and thinking that one of the big points that became so politically divisive with Hurricane Katrina was race. And you look at what's going on now in Texas, the question is, how did they handle the evacuation? How were people treated? And who got treated, in terms of, are they dealing with illegal immigrants at this moment? Is that an issue? How are they dealing with poor folks, the elderly? Are they making sure everybody gets out, or are certain people being left behind?
Right.
We don't know that story.
So much of it is preparation and planning to make sure that there isn't catastrophic damages like we saw with, Sandy. And so it looks like people heeded the warning here.
Well, yeah, and we certainly pray for everyone
Certainly.
in Texas right now. Well, stay right there. More on Fox's continuing coverage of Hurricane Harvey. Please don't go away.